Okay, so we're holding Siman Tzadikim in Hilchos Basar בחלב, and we'll do the Ramah. We did the Mechaber last time, we'll do some of the Nekudos, but I think we may need to review some additional ideas that are related to Siman Tzadikim next week, Thursday. It won't be a Tuesday. What we may do is do a good review of all the halachas before we go on to Tzadik Dalet, just in case some things were missed. We'll see how we progress. We'll see how we progress, because there's a very interesting taz that I'd like to go through. It's a little bit of a different idea, and we may have to leave it for another time. You know what they say, tofasta merube lo tofasta. Too much information at once is very difficult to digest. But there's some interesting halachas that can come out as a result of these additional iyunim, investigations or analysis, that of course it has a makor in the Gemara, even though it's not brought down by the Mechaber or the Ramah. The Taz, the Shachar, Bekive Eger, Pischei Tshuva, Nekudos HaKesef, Pri Megodim, they all sometimes bring up additional situations that it pays to look into, especially when we're dealing with all kinds of shilas that can come up. The more we know, the more it helps us analyze the situation. And it's a very interesting. I mean, this has to do with the following scenario. I'm just going to quickly tell you what it has to do with. Kedeiros of cheres, for example, jars made of earthenware, are very absorbent. And there's a question as to how long does it take for liquid that is sitting in the kedeiros of cheres, for the kedeiros of cheres to absorb. And we're not talking about with hot. We're talking about just sitting. Something that sits there for a while can have an effect, and we learned that from kavush. Kavush is not heat in itself, but it does have some koach, some power, to affect the k'dera, perhaps, that it's sitting in there. The liquid that's sitting in a particular pot for a number of hours does something to the pot, perhaps, even though no heat was involved. Kavush, of course, involves certain things that are kavushed together too. That even though there's no heat, that between each other, they can, of course, affect each other. That is how you get the pickles or anything that's pickled. The taste, it permeates the vegetables with time, even with the various spices. So with kavush, we will see it's very interesting, especially with deiros of cheres, as to what it does to the kli, how many hours is required for the liquid to be sitting in the kli. Also, it could make a difference as to something that has come later on and sat in the same kli, but that kli has already fully absorbed whatever liquid was there before. Will that make a difference, or if it's not fully absorbed? In other words, does it make a difference if the walls of a keli are fully absorbed? It can no longer absorb anything more, or not? So these are some of the issues that come up that the Taz talks about over here, that perhaps we'll leave it for another time. In Siman Tzadik Gimel, what we've discussed so far is Basar b'chalav, of course, but this also applies to Isurim. That something that is cooked in a pot, whether it's Basar, or whether it's chalav, or whether it's an Isur, can become pogum after a certain amount of time has transpired. Whether that time is me'is le'is, which is what we hold, or could it be a lina slilas? At times we are meikol, like Rashi, the shitas that hold that even a night by itself may make a difference. So we can be metzar of that. If we ever need to be metzar of that shita for heter, we can use it. We can rely on that, and it could make, of course, a big difference. 24 hours is versus less if it was just a lina slide. But either way, noisen tam lefgam is a fact that we all agree with, that can happen through a certain amount of time having gone by. There's a Pischei Tshuva over here, which is very interesting. I didn't see the whole makor to this. I don't know, therefore, where he takes it from. But in speaking about Zeya, the Mechaber doesn't seem to differentiate if there is Zeya or not in the Kisui. In other words, what happens is, if you cover, if you have a pot, and the pot is covered with a lid, the lid obviously is absorbing a lot of zeya. And ordinarily, the din of the kisui, as we will see today in the Ramah, is the same as a pot. The pot is fleishik, so is the lid of the pot, right? The pot is melichik, so is the lid of the pot. You've been using it together. And the reason for that is because of the zeya, right? The zeya basically goes up during the time of the bishul, and there's resiches, everything is boiling. So you have a certain amount of, lachluchis, or zeya, going up. So there's no doubt about the two of them having the same din. The question, however, concerns Eino ben Yoima. Eino ben Yoima, we said, is pogum. And we will see now in the Ramah that is not necessarily the case with the... I said not necessarily because Me'ikar Adin, he agrees that if the pot is Eino ben Yoima, so is the kisui Eino ben Yoima, right? And what did we just say? Eino ben Yoima is pogum. But he's going to introduce us to a chumrah that he himself says is a chumrah she does not have a tam. It's beloy tam. It's not a real chumrah. It's just for whatever reason we were machmer in our countries that the kisoi does not have a din of eino ben yoima, even though we consider the kisoi like the pot. But just because the pot is not ben yoima does not mean the kisoi is not ben yoima. Why? Because the kisoi has absorbed zeya. So what? Is zeya any different than the tam that's inside the pot? So the Rashal is one of those. There's several explanations given for this. The Rashal is going to tell us that the reason why that chumrah came about is because some of the lids are very narrow at the top, as we would say in Yiddish, at the spitz, at the top. And because they're narrow at the top, the zeya that's accumulated there remains there. It's not very well cleansed. It doesn't really completely dry. Then what do we have? We have an issue of a ba'ain. Whenever you have some ba'ain of the Isser, zeya, shamnunis, fats, as we've seen that, we've covered that. Whenever something is there ba'ain, in other words, it was not cleansed well, we assume it's clean. But if we know it's not, then it could be that there's still something there, and if there's still something there, that ba'ain does not become pogum. So that's one explanation given as to why the Ramah and others were machmir. It's a chumrah only with the kisui akdera. That if the kisui, especially the one that has the narrow center, narrow corner, whatever you want to call it, that the zeya that accumulated there is not nifgam, and because it's not nifgam, it's considered the ben yoima. Comes along the Pischei Tshuva and says something very interesting. Just extra. It's good to know that if that kisui was not used for 2 months, you don't have to worry about it. You hear? 2 months. Where he takes it, that I'm not sure. But he says 2 months. So you have a Pischei Tshuva that you can rely on in case somebody wants to be machmir. You don't have to be machmir after 2 months. Other than that, let's look at the Ramah inside. The Mechaber says that even though you're not allowed to cook basar in a pot of chalav, or chalav in a pot of basar, if there was a me'es leis, this is lechatchila, of course, if there was a 24-hour time difference between the balabasta made a mistake, and the following day she made lasagna, dairy lasagna, a dairy dish in this fleishike pot, it's noisen tam gam. And therefore, this noisen tam gam makes life easy because mutar atavshil, that the tavshil is mutar like deira asura lebasha balabasa v'chalav. In other words, right now we have a problem with this gdera. We have tam of basar and tam of chalav in this gdera, even though one of them is tam pogum. Nevertheless, you can't use the pot for either basar or chalav. Okay, the tafshil is mutar. Comes along the Ramah and says, aval shar dvorim mutar. Other things you can cook in it. You can cook vegetables, no problem. Anything that's parve. And the Shach on that says that even though the Ramah says you may cook other things, lemaisa, we will see in Siman Tzadik Dala, the next Siman, that we're machmer even on that. That even though me'ikar adin, especially according to the Mechaber, there's no problem cooking other things. You may cook other things that are not basar b'chalav. We're machmir not to even cook other things. Okay, fine. Now, the din kisui k'deiro kedin k'deiro atzma. The din of the kisui is like the din of the k'deiro atzma. In other words, if the kisui is eino ben yoima, we don't have a problem. It's just like the din of the k'deiro itself. So this is very helpful in a situation. Also, as we will see later on, he brings down this halacha. If you by mistake used kisui of the wrong pot to cover the spot, but it was eino ben yoima, right? So then you wouldn't have the same problem. You wouldn't have, in other words, it would just like you don't have a problem with the k'deiro eino ben yoima. Same thing with the kisui, because the kisui has the same din. It should have the same din like the k'deiro atzma. On that he says v'yesh machmirin b'kisui loyma de'af al pi she'eino ben yoima dinoi ki'ilu hoya ben yoima. So here it is. This is the Ramah that says that there are some who want to be machmir on the kisui to say that even though it's not ben yoima, it is like it's ben yoima. Goes Sharidura, who brings it the name of someone else. In some places that's the way they follow. This is the way I follow. In other words, it's not a real chumrah. It's a chumrah without a real tam. Even though they do bring down the Rasham, they do bring others who give some sort of tam, some sort of reason for it. If there's any other reasons to be mater, or Shabbos or hefsed, or because we're dealing with Shabbos, so it's on a Friday, or there's some other major loss, yesh lehatir. If the kisui is not a ben yoma, you can be mater just like you would be mater b'kdera in allowing the tafshil. Okay. So what was the? So we, as we explained.
Did you say that it or does it require a hefsid?
No, he says a hefsid. Just a hefsid. Since he doesn't say hefsid meruba, we've seen that before. That sometimes he makes an allowance even for a smaller hefsid. Yeah.
How small?
In other words, if it's a big pot, now you have to redo the whole thing. The whole dinner is spoiled because of that. It's not just a small amount that it's a tircha. It's a big bother. So anyway, so the Taz and the Shach and this Chumrah bring down the Rashal, as we mentioned, that we're talking about with these Kisuyim that have a narrow top, a narrow spot on the very, very top. And because it's narrow there, that is why it somehow can accumulate more Zayah than an ordinary cover. And you can't, because it's narrow, you can't clean it so well. I guess, used to clean, but it's, as much as they can.
You're not just dealing with taste, but with actually residue.
With actual residue, that's a good word for it, the be'ain, residue, yeah. It's hard to access it, to clean it well, and some people, are not that thorough with their cleaning. What's the big deal? So there's a little leftover residue, but this can make a difference over here. And we said anything that is be'ain, the noise and tam of gam klal does not affect it, does not apply to it.
It would have to really rot on it.
Yes, it would have to.
So maybe that's the 2 months.
Yeah. Why not 1.5 months? Right?
Because you want to start early.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, so this chumrah, let's assume we have just no hefsid. According to this chumrah, how else can we deal with it? The Ramah doesn't tell us. Because the Ramah says it's a chumrah b'li tam, and that's it. He says, of course, you can have some hefsid. But the Shach and Taz take it one step further.
Before you go there,
yeah.
So what's the value of a Ramah saying there are those that are machmir,
right?
Personally, and it's a chumrah without tam,
right?
And one should be makel wherever possible, basically.
Yes.
So my question is, why disregard those that say? Why go by the of some that say? And is that what is l'maaseh wasn't?
No. We will see. The Shach and Taz have a little bit of a different approach to this, which may save the day for a different reason. Taz being more makel than the Shach here. But without the Shach and Taz, simply stated, the Ramah says, it's not such a big chumrah like an ordinary, we're not just machmir, chanan b'shar isurim, which is much more of a shita. Here, it's just a chumrah because of this He doesn't even say he doesn't even mention the reason for it.
No, he says without a reason.
It's a chomer belotam. The others bring down the shachatas. They bring down this rasham, and there's other reasons. I just didn't mention the other reason. Someone would say that Zeya is more powerful than Tam. Zeya is the real thing. I didn't mention that because I'm just going with the rasham.
No, but that would be because it's mamashas, unlike with taste and not.
Right, I understand that. But
so
Shachan Taz don't. But the Shachan Taz don't mention
I'm
it.
just saying it's a stronger quirk to
Yeah.
Basar.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say they don't mention it. They mention it, but that's not the ikar reason. The Shach does bring down over here that the Toras Chatas kosav ktsas tam ledasa machmir mishum desir dechomer iser zeya v'reichel meiser shuali dei tam atzmoi. Yeah. I'm sorry. I said he doesn't. He does mention it, but he goes on to the marshal, and that's what the Taz does. Goes on to the marshal that's not the main reason. That explanation is not a good explanation. And he says he was talking about situations where the kisuyim, the covers, were narrow on the top, and that made a little bit more sense because it was hard to clean. Okay, so now the Shachan Taz say like this: in a regular situation without the Ramaz heter of Hefsed and so forth, the Tzorah Shabbos, could you have shishim? I mean, shishim is always an option of being mevatel whatever is there. So the Taz makes it simple. The Taz says, you know what, if you have shishim connected that little spot, you're okay. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. That's understood. Makes sense. All right, you have shishim connected that spot. What do you mean with no, of course, but it
was you.
It happened already. Exactly. And so it's in a binyon, but we're machmir, but you have shishim anyway in the tafshil connected that little spot that you couldn't get there. You know, we are talking about relatively a narrow, small spot. I mean, how much is it already? Exactly. The shach makes life difficult over here. He makes it very difficult. There's two questions by Rabbi Akiva Eiger, very interesting questions. The shach says no, you need shishim connected shishim.
Because
it's one of those situations. Yeah, because the shach says there's a chashash over here that we're talking about. Of course, it gets hot on top, and you may not have enough down there to be mevatel in the tafshul, to be mevatel. You may have just 59 as it's going up to be mevatel what's there, and in the meantime, what's there is going to become chanan and make the whole kisui treif. Very, very.
At least times of its own size plus itself.
Plus itself, yeah. So in other words, you will need that times the rest of it. Almost basically 60 times 60, like we've said before, by T.
So this is a situation where you actually have 60 in the tafshil against that little spot. Nevertheless, the shach is presuming
that at a given time,
the zeya will have this from the contents in the pot.
Yeah, in other words, at a given time you may not have shishim because of the right going up, and in the meantime it will become also the whole.
What's going up doesn't have to be connected to what's in the bottom, so that connects
somehow. But which is schwer. It's difficult to understand why he says that. That's one of Rabbi Akiva's questions. Right. Wait a minute. At the time you're cooking, it's all connected. That's question. And that question is an obvious question. In other words, why would you think that for a moment that was from what we've said before in other halachas in previous simanim, it doesn't appear that would be a problem when things are connected, when the lid is covered, right? So it's a little difficult to understand why the shach is concerned about.
Maybe because of the heat.
The what?
So it's cooking too much.
Oh yeah, everything
turns down the heat.
Exactly.
So now there's a little moisture remaining on the top, but they disconnect
right.
it.
Yeah.
It becomes
you have to say that.
And she turns the heat back on.
Obviously, the shach was aware of this, and he probably thought about all the whole thing is a chashash here. So he says, at a given moment, you only have 59 instead of 60 going up. And that, of course, in turn, will eventually will answer the rest, and you would need 60 connected. All right. So the first question Rabbi Elyahu had was, wait a minute, but at the time, they are connected, so why think about that? All right. So that's one question. The other question, which is, he says, Tzorech iyun gadol. Whenever you learn halacha, or even Tosfos, you will find sometimes, but this is Rabbi Elyahu is known for this, because he's medayek. He's very precise in determining if something is a question or it's. If he says it's a big question, don't try to answer it and think, I got an answer for him, because if he said it's a tzorech iyun gadol tzadik ayin gimel, then he must have worked hard in figuring this one. He already thought of it.
And
you may be lucky, Well, Baruch Hashem, and sometimes we are able to be mechaven, or we're able to answer, but I don't think it's so simple. But Yore Deah says, what do you mean, nevela? Chanan? We're talking about a belia over here that is pogum on the rest of the kisui.
So he's understanding it.
No, how could you say nevela on the rest of the thing?
Now I'm going to say I had a quick answer.
Yeah? No, but you understand the question?
Of course.
So how could you?
Yes.
Well, where does this Hanan come in here with the rest?
I already rejected that as the possible concern because of that exact point.
Yeah.
The Blia, it can't be.
Yeah.
Can't be the Blia. Besides that, we don't say Hanan by Blia. I'm very specific.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But no, and now you've got here Homer without Tom, so you're going to rely when we don't say Blia
exactly.
by Hanan by Blia.
Are we assuming in all of these covering the pot and that's...
Yes.
Because sometimes I see this sometimes.
Right.
Off a little bit. In which case you may have to affect what's going on here. I just want to
Yeah, but here, for the most part, the kisui covers most of the pot. So it's going to affect what's the contents of the pot and each other if it's the wrong one. We haven't gotten the case of the wrong one here. Was what happens, because there's different scenarios that the Ramah brings down at the end of the seif of what happens if you use the wrong one.
Yeah, but that's not the...
Right.
Over there it's not Eino Ben.
It's what?
Here it's not.
It's not Eino Ben Yomo in that case, right? Here we're talking about the case that the kisu has a din of Igero as far as being Eino Ben Yomo. Very good. Right. So there, on that we said, but if it's narrow, there's a problem with the Zeya, there's a Chumra B'li Tam.
But I thought that was
right.
The Zeya that's rising that spot
only
and becoming
right
from the tafshil.
That's what the Shach says, yeah.
So now you have a fresh Zeya, not a B'liya that's Eino. You have a fresh Zeya.
Correct.
That is eating a mamashis, namely the residue of actual in that little spitz.
Yeah, okay.
So now you're not talking about the Eino Ben Yomo B'liya in the.
No, the Zeya is Ben Yomo. Everybody, even Rabbi Kiva understands
right.
that.
So if the Zeya is Ben Yomo,
sure.
and it now combines with that little place, and it's only 59 times, then you have the 59 times of this.
Right.
Combined, let's say, of milk, combined with the residue of basar that is still valid and not pagum.
Right.
Because it's only 1 day old.
Sure.
So now you have all of that as a blia going to the pot cover.
Yeah, but the pot cover, the rest of the pot cover.
I'm not interested in the rest of the pot cover. I have 59 times now that amount that was a residue.
I understand.
That's what's going to usher the rest.
No, we're not talking about the tafshil right now.
But ultimately the Ramah is going to usher the tafshil because of the. Not the Ramah, the Shach is going to answer the tafshil.
Okay.
He's going to require 60 times 60.
Yeah, but
why? Because now you have the 59 times of the Zeya together with the non-pagum residue.
No, but he's not talking about that.
Who?
The Shach is not just talking about the non-pagum residue.
That gives you a new B'liya.
No, you're right. That is fine. I agree with that because that's the ain.
No, it gives you, the new B'liya is the combination of the 59 times Zeya together with the
Yes.
So now you need 60 times of that because the 59 times Zeya with the residue became Hanan.
No, but he's not talking about that.
Who?
The Shach.
Why not?
The Shach says the rest of the kisui, you need against the whole thing.
That became a B'liya in the kisui.
Yeah, but the rest of the kisui is pogum.
No. The B'liya is, he doesn't say the whole kisui.
I think he does.
60 times 60 of the residue. He says 60 times 60 of the kisui.
That's the way. That's
how I understood you.
Well, otherwise, Rabbi Kiva Eiger's kasha is not a kasha.
I thought you were saying 60 times 60 of the residue, not of the kisui.
No, not the kisui. Because otherwise, I thought about that too. 1 second. If you are right, then what's Rabbi Kiva Eiger's problem here? We're talking about the ain. The ain is not pogum.
Because he's thinking of the Eino Ben Yomo B'liya in the kisui, not in the new B'liya of the Zeya together with
the Zeya is not, the Zeya is considered Ben Yomo, if it's true that there's Zeya there, right?
The Zeya is Ben Yomo B'liya.
Right. No, not the Zeya. Well, okay, the Zeya. Whatever you want, Shanunis, whatever is there Be'ain.
No, that's the residue.
The residue.
No, the Zeya is what's
rising
right
okay,
now.
So let's call it, let's talk about this, not the Zeya, the Shanunis, the Be'ain.
Okay, the residue.
Even Rabbi Kiva Eiger would agree that is Be'ain and that is not a Ben Yomo. It's not
right.
pogum.
So let's set that aside.
So when he tells you, 1 second, when Rabbi Kiva Eiger tells you that there's a part of this keli that is pogum, what is he talking about?
He's talking about the blia. That's in cover of the top of the pot.
Right. right?
That's the Eino Ben Yomo Blia
Right.
that's already there for
That's right. That is for sure in the Ben Yomo.
Yes, that's what he's talking about.
Right, okay.
But the Shach maybe wasn't talking about that. The Shach maybe was talking about the new Blia that is the result of the combination of the residue with steam that is now rising. You have milk steam rising now, meeting residue. The milk steam does not have 59 against the residue. Combines with the residue, becomes a Blia, a Hanan Blia. Now you need 60 times against that new Hanan Blia. The combination of the steam with the residue.
Yeah, but how much? It's not going to be that. It's not going to be that much.
Well, if you have,
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
it's the exact parallel case to the drop that fell on the outside of the pot.
Yeah.
We also said 60 times 60 why, because the milk on the outside, the blia spread in the wall of the pot, but not sufficiently to be mevatel whatever meat was in the pot.
But if I understood what you're saying, but
same idea here.
But the Shach doesn't seem to be saying that. Let me read it to you inside. It's something so small.
Because of the zeya.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Okay, yes. Because
of the zeya and the residue that together are now absorbed in the kisei.
Yeah, but
it was already on.
No, of course. But why should the rest of the kisui become nevela?
Because it's now absorbing the steam together with the combination of steam and residue.
As he says, the shema ein bo shishim pamim shishim achad 61, 60 times 61 pochos me'at keneged ma shebe'ein v'dom le'eil.
Now, if the cover of the pot would have 60 against the combination of steam and residue that is now entering the cover of the pot,
anyway,
then it would be misbatel.
Anyway, in the end he says, of course, you don't have to be machmer so much.
Okay, that's something else.
Or if there's a hole in the kisui.
So you see it's going on the steam being absorbed in the kisui. If there's a hole, then some of it will escape through the hole.
Right.
So it's talking about this being absorbed in the kisui. A steam that combined with the residue of meat.
Anyway, a lot of people don't like this chumrah. He says, if I had the ability, I would be mevatel this mit.
Okay.
But here we're saying, but the whole idea of answering the kisui, the rest of the kisui has a tam pogum.
That's not the tam pogum is not our problem.
Yeah, but he says it is.
Our problem is the residue,
right,
in combination with the rising steam.
You're right, but why would he say here?
Now this becomes a new fresh blia of
right.
Hanan.
Yeah, but the rest that's going to make.
Now, is there enough in the rest of the cover to be mevatel this residue in combination?
No. But the thing is, why does he says clearly that eventually this residue that is being that has become now nevela is gonna go ahead and make the rest of the kisui nevela. And then you may not have shishim keneged the whole kisui.
Right. But it's going to usher the rest of the kisui because this is being right now hot steam absorbed in the kisui. And you have a nevela that is being absorbed along with it. So how would it not become hanan in the blia?
Because the rest of the blia of the kisui is not...
would have to be 60 again.
Yeah, but it's not
the
ben
combination of zeya and residue.
But it's not ben yoimoy.
No, but it would still, in order to affect anything, to accomplish anything against the combination and residue that are now being freshly absorbed,
right,
the kisui would have to have 60 eno ben yomo against the combination of the two. If I have steam that is 59 times the residue.
No, but you understand that. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but if the rest of the kisui is not ben yoimo, the blias in that rest of the kisui cannot become hanan.
I don't need them to become hanan. The kisui now has a hanan consisting of fresh steam together with residue.
Where? On that one
59
spot.
59 times the spot.
On the one spot.
59 times the spot.
Right.
So therefore I need 60 times that 59 times the spot.
But not everybody agrees.
No, 59 times the size of the spot.
Yeah, but so he says you would need against the whole kisui.
No, he says you need 60 times 60 of the spot. 60 times 60, that's what you told us.
No, but
not
why,
60 times 60 of the kisui.
Why does he say the rest of the kisui becomes hanan?
Because it's now absorbing this combination of steam and residue. He's not saying the whole kisui becomes hanan. The size that he requires to be mevatel is 60 times 60 of the residue, of that little corner.
Okay.
Yeah, and what? So you're saying that the
like in the drop.
So you're saying basically what you're saying. I mean, maybe you're right. I mean, after all, we're talking about the shach. We're not just talking about an ordinary. So you're saying is that the shach was concerned only with the residue, and the reason why he says, of course, And the reason why he says that the whole kisu becomes chanan, it is because now this new residue will affect the whole. So
not the new residue. The steam,
the steam
in combination with the old residue,
will affect the whole kisu.
Will be a new blia, and that blia will be 60 times the size of that.
I understand.
So now you need 60 times that 60.
Yeah, but
and that's what he says. That's the formula.
What you're saying is that not to understand him to mean that you need against the whole kisui.
He didn't say you need 60 times against the kisui.
Okay.
He said you need 60 times.
If that's what he meant, then
but
you're right.
That's what you read out loud. He was saying you need 60 times 60 of the residue of that spit. 60 times 60.
Maybe we ought to reread the rabbi ought to reread.
The problem is, and that's why it's not clear, and that's where Rabbi Akiva Eiger understands one thing, and maybe he meant something else. I mean, that's where we have sometimes misunderstandings. All he says, there was a very little bit in that mokum tsar. It's true. The steam, the zeh of the basar, oile lemala, it will go up. Okay. Ad shishim kenegdoi. In other words, there won't be. In other words, and you won't have shishim, right? Ad shishim kenegdoi. Ad shenase mashebe'ein nevela.
Okay, so the Ba'ain now became Nevela.
Okay, the Ba'ain became a Nevela. Fine, okay. Ve'achar kach, after this Ba'ain became Nevela, Akisui Nasa Nevela. Who needs that?
I know the
Why?
I know the problem.
Right.
The problem is that you're calling the residue Ba'ain. He's not talking about the residue being Ba'ain. He's talking about the combination of steam. Which Ba'ain became Nevela? That's not the meat residue. That's the steam that rose to the top of the pot.
I understand that, yeah.
That's the be'ain,
which
became the vela.
Yeah, but again...
The residue, which is flesh, has now come in contact. Why isn't that residue that's now up there? Nevela is...
Yeah.
Of course it is. You're absolutely right. But the steam itself also becomes the vela.
Ilan, I understand what you're saying.
No, excuse me. Don't understand me so fast.
All right.
The steam itself, because you're putting the lid on the pot, the steam itself also becomes nevela. And the steam is now, we're saying, almost 60 times of the residue. And that steam he's calling be'ain.
Okay, the problem is...
So now I have 60 times the residue, be'ain, as nevela.
Yeah, so you have a little bit more.
60 times.
Yeah.
It's not a little bit. So now I need 60 times 60. Yeah. And isn't this what he said, what I need, the formula? I need 60 times 60 of the residue. Which one?
No. Yeah, no, the problem is, let me tell you, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference, because when you have the zayah going up, you only have as much zayah as that can fit in that particular spot.
No, it spreads. Yeah. Once it touches it, the zayah is connected with the whole zayah is interconnected.
Yeah.
So as soon as one little drop of the zayah becomes hanan, if the whole zayah is not 59 against it, the whole zayah.
Yeah, but you're gonna have so much more to be mevatel. I don't see the difficulty.
No, you don't have much more to be mevatel.
Why
Because he said, I'm up to 60. What was the zayah that was coming up? What you just quoted was, I'm up to 60.
Okay.
So he's taking that particular case where it's up to.
That's very hypothetical.
But that's what he said.
Yeah, but anyway.
That's the way. That's going to... Okay.
Right.
So that
yeah.
You have 60.
Right.
That spot has to be more than of the lid. Because otherwise, whatever's coming up will automatically be 60 times.
Well, that's what, the shach is choishish for that you may not have the required amount.
You will have a situation where you suddenly have less than 60.
The only disadvantage that you have, Ilan, in proposing that is you're not reading Rabbi Akiva Eiger.
Fine, but
no. One second.
No. First understand the shach, and then we'll read that Rabbi Akiva.
So I'm going to read now that we read the shach.
Before you read the Rabbi Akiva, which shach was it? Was it Dalet or Gimel?
Dalet. So we just read the shach out loud. Now let's look at Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva just has one line on this. Remember, the first issue that he had with it was that they're interconnected. Remember, you put a lid on top of the pot, matchil artiach, it goes up, right? So it shouldn't be a problem. They're all interconnected. Like you're having a tip. Remember the case of tipa falling neged a roitem? It's all together.
Right.
They bring it like shishim neged atipa, but not. You put the cover, you put the lid on top. It should take care of it if you're concerned about that spot. Okay. Now, then he says, in a few words, v'gam mashashach kosa ve'achar kach nasa akisui nasa nevela. You see, so he's talking about those words. Ve'achar kach akisui, the kisui becomes a nevela. Tamua b'yoiser. The ain't shayach. It's not possible. Shabalua pogum yenas and nevela. The noisim tam levgam.
So you see, that's how he's understanding the shach.
And at the end, he says tzorchli iyum godol.
So that's what you see. He's understanding the shach to be saying that the blia that's pogum has become nevela.
Right.
Well, who says the shach meant that?
Yeah. Could be he didn't mean that. Yeah, but otherwise, why say that the rest of the kisu becomes nevela? It's hard to understand.
And unless he's talking about the zayah. Unless it's because now you've got 60 times that residue of Hanan absorbed in the
not in the kisui.
Yes.
In that little spot.
No, in the whole kisui.
Yeah.
You have 60 times of the residue. 60 times that.
Oh, you're saying that new zayah.
Right, the new blia of the zayah that became Hanan from contact with the residue.
I see.
So now maybe it's not the whole kisui, but whatever zayah will.
Whatever you may not have shishim. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. That's a possibility. Yeah.
It's a possibility.
That's why, because after all,
can't.
No, it's the shach. It's the shach. So it's not, but that's what he meant. Yeah. Good. Yeah. That, by the way, that's what I would think too. That's the only possibility in explaining the shach.
If not, then Rabbi Akiva Eiger is 100% right.
Exactly. Right. But I don't know what Elon's saying is the only possibility. In other words, you're having this new residue, this new steam, this new zayah, now becoming usher. Was as a nevela, and of course you may no longer have. If you would require a lot more now to be mevatel that new Hanan. Yeah.
Like in the drop that fell on the outside above the roy.
Yeah. Anyway, the halacha l'maisa, that's what the Pri Megadim holds to. B'makom shenehefsed, that's how we deal with this chumrah.
So he goes like the Ramah, basically.
Yeah. Now, by the way, the Pri Megadim, it appears in explaining this shach, concerning the first question of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, they're interconnected, right? Concerning the first question of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, that they're interconnected, the why be choishes that it's becoming a problem to begin with.
Yes.
So I think the Pri Megadim explains on that we're dealing with the situation that the shach has a concern that the zayah goes up, and before the zayah ever goes up, it's already yatse ledes boy. Before you really have zayah interconnected, because what zayah does is it connects the lid with this. You may not have all that connection yet, but you still have yatzer ledes. And when you have yatzer ledes, boy, it is still a problem. Yeah, in other words, you can say that too.
How would you have a situation the zayah is hot enough to rise, ledes boy at the top and the bottom?
No, the yatzer ledes all over. Yeah. You can have the pot, the key, so everything is hot. Yatzala, this boy, means that the whole thing is happening.
No, but the zayah
you don't have zayah coming up yet.
So if you don't have zayah coming up yet, what's the problem?
Yeah, but you have yatzala, this boy, right? And when you have some heat,
so that could rely on it's a metal pot, and if it's a little hot, the whole thing is cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so what? But you have the meat in the bottom.
No chiname.
But you have the milk in the bottom.
But you have some residue.
So you're talking about the.
Yeah, you have residues. You have yatzala, this boy. We will see in the Ramah that when things are completely dry and there's no tafshil in the pot, it's like two kederas that are hot touching each other that you don't have any liquid. You don't have to be concerned about it. But obviously, once you have food inside, and let's even have a little bit of zayah, but you don't have enough zayah, maybe. It's yatzeledes, boy. It's a remote chash. You already have some, what's the word for it? Not precipitation is in rain. When you have a little bit of liquid. Lachluchis, how do you say lachluchis in English?
Humidity.
Not humidity.
Moisture.
Moisture, thank you. You already have some moisture. With the yatzeledes, boy, then you have a problem. Zayah would obviously, if you had real zayah, you would connect.
Is that the case like salting in liquid?
Yes. So it only goes so far. It doesn't go very, very far. Right. That's true too. It only kedei netila. Unless it's very, very greasy, with Shuman.
From what you're saying, each level, because they're interconnected,
right,
we're going to need shishim. Because there's real Hanan. Do we have because if it's all interconnected,
Right.
if the tafshil is more than 60,
Okay.
so mevatel, that is, you're not going to have a chana because it'll all be mevatel because 60 times going. So do we have any milk to the zay?
That's a good question, but apparently it's difficult to ascertain.
Since we are working on the
Yeah.
time,
Right. It's difficult.
and the tafshil is only.
Yeah.
Okay,
When we deal with the zaya, we're basically saying that the entire amount that's being cooked is emitting zaya.
No, but it depends on the ratio between solids.
And
Certain
steam.
liquids turn out far faster and far to a larger degree than solids. Liquids and solids in the tafshil.
Okay.
If I have a tafshil that comes to a larger liquid,
Well, obviously
I'll
you
have
you
more
can
zaya.
you only have. Okay, we're going to get into this
Zay-
towards
zay-
the. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Is going to expand.
depends on the absolute quantity of steam. Depends also on how
The
tall
steam will
the pot
steam
is.
will disperse with higher airspace in that pot.
That's true. Yes, it will. Right.
But how much it is depends on how high, how tall the pot is.
So the question I have is there
Okay.
a ratio or do we have a standard or not? It would appear from what you're saying
Right.
that we do not hold
We do not.
so
Right.
would be mevatel in zay.
That's correct. Yeah.
And nor does it need.
Well,
Because as
if
long
it
as,
did.
because if it's not connected, if the tafshil is not connected to zaya, it can't be mevatel. It has to be connected to be mevatel.
How does the zay
And if it is connected,
If it is, he's talking about a situation where it is
if it is
connected.
connected, then the tafshil and the zaya are considered one unit. We don't between the two.
So that-
They're being mevatel. They put together.
Yeah, but I think what he's talking about, it's a good point, and I'll be mentioning it soon. And you also touched on it. You have, let's say, you have a situation here that's not related to our shaila, but that you have a tafshil of basar in liquid being cooked, okay?
Right.
And you put the wrong lid on top of it,
Right.
okay? We're not talking about Eino Binyan anymore. Forget that. We're
Oh,
talking
so
about
we're talking about how to different.
yeah. But his question is a valid question.
Different
Con-
thing.
It's a different thing, but we want to know what that thing is. You know, that question is a good question because when you're dealing with zaya per se, whenever zaya is a problem, forget about Eino Ben Yomer right now. Everything is Ben Yomer, and you have something cooking inside. We do know there's a difference between, by the way, Melicha being cooked and fleishik being cooked, because one perhaps emits more zaya than another. That's just a fact. That certain tafshilim emit more of zaya. Okay.
It depends also on the ratio between the pot.
Okay,
and
so
the
then getting
solids.
back to what you were saying now. Okay, so based on his question, you were saying it would depend on the ratio between the liquid and the solids, the gabe what?
And also
Right.
and also depends on how tall the pot is.
Okay, let's assume
How
it's
much
small.
space is there?
Right, no, we're not dealing with the size of the pot right now because that we covered by the din of.
But he's asking
of-
for
of
a
the oven.
standardized measure of between food and steam.
Is the pressure cooker like
No. That was one question. I expanded the question to ratio between liquid and solids.
Well, it depends on what liquids you add to the solids. I mean, it depends. Are you cooking a soup? It depends what you're cooking.
Yeah, but you didn't figure out. You didn't get my question. Let's
Okay, what is your question?
My question, but I'll get to that to the end, has to do with something a little bit different. I'm expanding on your question. Your question was a relation between the steam and what is being cooked. Okay, so Ilan said, of course, it would depend on many factors, including liquids versus solids.
The ratio between liquids and solids, the height of the pot, how much space there is. Well,
Right.
The question is if you put that.
And for that, there is no real formula as far as what we're concerned is. We if there is zaya, then you need to connect the whole thing.
If you have more
Right.
tiva,
Yeah. Right. So we don't.
everything is connected.
Right.
It's not just the zay again. It's also going through the tafshil.
absolutely right.
Yes. Yes.
And when
The zaya is the top shell, pretty much.
okay,
That
Yeah.
was Rabbi Akiva Eiger's first comment.
Yeah.
then when or is it that it not be
Oh.
against that?
No, so that's what I was going to. I expanded the question.
Well, wait a second, just to answer what we
Yes.
said before was, let's say the balabusta comes and says, "Oh, the food is getting cooked too much," and she turns the flame down. Now you have ziyah that already rose. There's no more ziyah rising because the temperature is now too low suddenly. So you have some ziyah that remains above, stuck to the.
And back on.
But now it already became hanan.
Yeah.
Now you'll need 60 times 60,
Yeah.
which is what the shop requires.
And you may not have that, obviously, yeah. So anyway, so for the most part, we don't differentiate. There is, however, a situation where we will differentiate in the relationship between liquids and solids. You're cooking stew, meat, okay? you have a piece of meat, 3 ounces of meat, right? And you have a lot of water. Now, that water is fleishiks. You can't have pizza after that, right? You're having what's called marak temani, that is Yemenite soup, right? You don't have that much meat, and you have a little bit of meat. You have a broth, right? And for some reason, you have to be meshayr. We've heard the word to be meshayr. Meshayr means to calculate,
Estimate, no?
or to estimate. That's better. To estimate by calculating, right? How much meat there was here? Now, when do we do these kinds of estimates? One time we make these kinds of estimates is when we're dealing with a Gdera Chadosha. We'll learn that in Siman Sadik Dalet. We'll get into it more. This is not the first time. This is the first time we are cooking in this pot, either because it's a new pot, or because the last time they cooked in this was more than a me'es le'es. So we're not concerned about those tamim, because that time is pogum, right? And when we don't, because ordinarily when we need shishim keneged a pot, that's a lot, because we said most tafshilim, most contents of pots do not have shishim keneged the blias of the pot, and it's going to be a problem. There is a shach, however, I think it's a shach, who says you may have shishim keneged a klipa of the pot, and sometimes that's good to know, because sometimes all you have an isser in the pot is the klipa. So that's good to know. It's a good cloud to know that you may not have shishim in the pot connected the whole pot, unless it's a very thin wall. It's a wide wall, you know. But you do have shishim connected the klipa of the pot. So that's good to know. So anyway, when you have to be meshayr, how much is being cooked right now for whatever reason? The Minchas Shai brings down. I saw this thing somewhere. The Minchas Shai brings down that it all depends how much meat you have in relationship to the liquid. If you have very, very little liquid and it becomes a dense or thick roitev, you have to be meshayr keneged the whole amount of roitev. If you have a lot of water and a little bit of meat, you can be meshayr only keneged the basar itself that was cooked. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Now,
Did the meat make the water thick, or did the water dilute?
in other words, you could have a little bit, a small piece of meat into this. I mean, it's fleishik as far as we're concerned. Of course, you're not going to eat melichas after that. The pot is fleishik, but if you ever, for some reason, can be or are allowed to be meshayr or need to be meshayr on how much meat was absorbed here, you can just, if you recall, it was only a 3 ounces piece of meat. You don't have to include all the water. That will make a big difference. Mm-hmm. Or do you? So it depends on how much meat versus the relationship. Now, this is true by Basar. But it's not true, it would not be the case by Isurim, according to the Ramah. Ramah holds, like many poskim, that we say Chanan b'shar Isurim, right? Remember that?
Sure.
Chanan b'shar Isurim, which means what? If you have a piece of treif meat cooking in this large amount of liquid that is not shishim keneged the piece of iser, then all the water becomes chanan.
Yeah.
So guess what? When we would be meshayr in isurim or in basar b'chalab, which everybody holds is chanan, guess what? You would have to be meshayr against the whole thing, because chanan is a din in itself, that it basically makes everything asur.
Right.
Whereas if you're dealing with hetera bola, like basar or chalab by themselves, this may be helpful. This can come in handy in figuring the relationship between liquid versus solids. I thought that was very interesting.
It
You can,
dilutes it.
right? Dilutes it.
Because the first
Right.
case where they have little against a lot of meat, what happens is that's just spreading out.
Yeah.
It's not as solid anymore. Some of it is now
Some of it is now floating around.
but
Yeah.
it's present everywhere.
Right.
But when you have a lot of water against a little meat, then the water is really diluting.
Exactly.
The meat cannot fill the whole water anymore.
Yes.
Or is it just?
Yeah. Then you can use the ratio of, I know how much meat was in the pot when it was cooking, and now that if I have to deal with that meat, and I know the amount, I don't have to deal with all the liquid.
I think what he's asking, so
Yeah.
I take 1 ladle full liquid out of this pot,
Right.
that I can say, if I had 20 times as much water as in the pot, then if I take 1/20th
Oh,
of
that's
the
your question?
ladle,
No, we don't have.
1/20th of the
Yeah.
ladle will now be the meat,
Yeah.
and the 19/20th of the ladle will just be water. So I only need 60 against 120 of the contents of the ladle.
I think in Siman Tzadik Dalet.
Isn't that what you?
Yeah. I think that may be true. I mean, if that's what you meant, it could be
Because he was asking for
in
a
Siman
ratio.
Tzadik Dalet. It could be in Tzadik Dalet. I do recall that sometimes we can figure out ratios that can help us. But the Minchas Shai that I was quoting does not get into actual percentages. He just says a lot of water and a little bit. But it could be. We'll have to wait till we get to Siman Tzadik Dalet.
Once you have that situation, so the question is, where's the threshold?
Right.
One, does it become a lot of water against the
He
little
doesn't
bit?
say. He doesn't
But
say.
once you have that situation, then
Yeah.
you could start arguing ratio.
Yes.
A 20th of the
Right,
ladle is
right.
meat, the 19/20 are water.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Okay.
So I
Well,
assume if you have 20 times, it would be your ratio.
I think we'll hold off on that. Tzadik Dalet is where this is somewhat discussed. All right. Just let's go on a little bit more here. So we saw that the Shach holds that even though the Ramah says we don't use it for other things, you can't. In other words, we can cook. We can cook it for other. We can use this pot to cook other parva things. The minig is later on we see that the minig is also not to use it for cooking anywhere. Anything until you make Hagala first. This pot was fleishiks, it was used by mistake for melichiks, it was not binyoimo. Still, right now it has blias of both. You don't use it until you make Hagala. Now, what's interesting about this is there's a halacha Kuf Chaf Aleph. For all of those who you are interested in Yore Deah Chelik base, it's a siman about hechsher kelim. Being machshir kelim. You buy a kelim from a guy. You're a caterer. You want to machshir the kitchen. Look at this halacha. Very interesting halacha. Im higel a kli atzorech libun. Remember we spoke about it last time that one could be makel at times if something required libun and there was hagala done to it instead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That we can take that into consideration. There is a Rashba on that. Now the Rashba's case was having used yerakos, you cooked vegetables in it, so there was a little bit of hagala in a sense. Something happened as a result of cooking vegetables. Listen, this is not the ideal hagala. You definitely don't want to do this lechatchila, even if you use plain water. We don't hold like that. In other words, plain water meaning that it still remains, it could still be a problem of a me'es la'es from the water, as opposed to from the original iser. We will see that. There's a separate question whether if somebody cooked water within a me'es la'es from the cooking of basar or cooking of iser, of course it makes a difference if it's basar or iser, when you count the new me'es la'es from the cooking in the water or the cooking of the meat. We'll get into that another time. The point is that the cooking of vegetables by itself, according to the Rashba, within that me'es la'es drew out some of the blias. And it could be that you don't have to worry about cooking something now within a me'es la'es of the basar, because you already did have a partial hagala. Now, even though we don't really hold, not everybody holds like that Rashba, here he says like this. No, it didn't overflow, but the fact that something was being cooked there, that is parv, it drew out some, and whatever time you may have left is very little. Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph, Chilik Beis Yore Deah. So there he talks about the din that you cannot do hagala if something requires libun. I mean, if something needs libun, you do libun, not hagala. But
that comes to the fire zone.
right, no, there's no liquid. So, but let's say im higel kli atzorech. Let's say you did it anyway, like the Rashba's case, based on the Gemara, that it helps. Helps it may, but you're not supposed to do that. But im higel kli atzorech libun, what's the halacha? Asu lishtamish bo bechamin lechatchila. The Mechaber says you cannot use it now to cook because you didn't do libun. You took something that needs libun and you only did hagala. So lechatchila you cannot use it for chamin, afilu shelo al yedei eish, even if it's not by the fire. Right? That's the Mechaber. Very simple. That's the din. That's the halacha. Okay. So here we're not talking about ino ben yom ben. Here we're just talking about pashut lechatchila. You're not. Abal mutar lishtamesh bo tzoinen. The Ramah, this is the Ramah. You're allowed to use it for cold stuff. You want to put, orange juice, right, into this pot. It's tzoinen. You're not cooking anything in it. They didn't do the right. They weren't machshir properly, but you want to use it for cold stuff, just to pour. Ramah says mutar l'shtamish b'tzoyin and afilu lechatchila al yidei hadocha. You have to rinse it out. V'shif shephetif. Yeah. V'chol shekim b'kli shetzorech hagola. Obviously, if the kli needs hagola, not libud, you're also allowed to use it for cold. This pot is waiting to be hagola. In the meantime, can I use it for orange juice? Yes. V'dafka b'derech arai, as long as you do it once in a while. You're not going to use it for orange juice every day. Right? You have no other choice. But if you want to use it, you want to use it on a regular basis, yeshmachmir v'oimrim, that pilu l'shtamish b'tzon tzorach hagola libud. Why gzera shema yishtamish b'chami? V'ochin oagi. But because you may forget, to use it on a regular basis, we don't allow you until you do hagola or libud, whatever is required. Because you may eventually use it with hot water by mistake. Okay? So based on that, what do we see? That the chumrah that the Shach is talking about, that the Ramah says that we don't cook other things in this pot that absorbs, has now blias of basar v'chalav, even though the basar or the chalav is pogum, that chumrah is only to be mevashel, b'chamin, but not litzoinen. In other words, even though you may hold with this chumrah of not using it to cook even parv, you may use it with cold on a temporary basis. As we saw from that Siman later on, Ramah himself said it's okay, but derech harai. Cold you can use. Chumrah is on bishul of other things, but not on cold. Now this chumrah, by the way, is only if you hold like the Ramah, not like if you hold according to the Mechaber. We will see later on there's a difference between the two, a big difference, Sfardim Ashkenazim, Legabe nat bar nat, and how that affects Noisin Tam bar Noisin Tam. We'll get to that. The next Siman is the next Siman Tzadik Daled is one of the big Simonim in Basar B'chalav. It involves typical situations of using by mistake a fleishik spoon for your coffee, and this, like they're doing it twice instead of once. All of these things, we will see that in Siman Tzadik Daled. You have big Siman there. Now let's say the kisu, by the way, and the gdera are both not ben yoimoy, and you cook something parv in it, then of course everything is mutter. You don't have to be machmir for zeya and all these things. No, there's no chumrah. The chumrah of the Ramah does not apply if the two of them are ein ben yoima, and you cook something parv. All right, so let's finish up with the Ramah here. Im lokhu kisu reiseach migdero shel basar. We covered a little bit this before, but here he actually brings it down. If you took by mistake a kisu reiseach, it's hot, lid, migdero shel basar. Something was cooking there, basar. You took it by mistake, v'nosnoi asor gdero shel chalav, and you put it by mistake on the gdero of melichix, or the other way around. Im shneim chamim, if they both are hot, shneim asurim, they both are asur. As long as the Ramah adds in yesh machal b'gdero shel basar b'chalav, they both have food. Because if they both have food, what does that mean? That they both became asur on that day. They both had zeya going up. They both, therefore, either one will asur each other. V'ima kisui tzoyne, but what if the kisui, the lid is cold? In other words, by the time, like Ilan said before, the balabusta shut it down. So it may have once cooked, but right now the kisu became cold. The whole thing is cold. Because what did we learn before? Tato govar. So you may have the lid being cold, but the lid right now is ben yoimah. It has blias. The sear, the kdera is ben yoimah. It's cooking. It has machal inside. Just the bottom is hot. So what? There's still going to be both shnei masurim. However, he does add that's only conditioning it has to have become, the zeya has to have begun going up. So even though the kisui is cold, the zeya goes up, the tato govar. So that's basically it makes no difference that the top one is cold. Once you have zeya coming up, they both are ben yoimo, they both absorbed because they both were cooking. You have meichel in both tafshilim, they're both aser. Now, let's go and see a different situation. What if the kisui is cham, and the pot is cold, so the top is hot, the bottom is cold? The Ramah, not everybody agrees, but the Ramah says akol shari. And now he explains himself. Like a Michael tzorich klipa. Wow, that's strange. Only the Michael needs klipa. Why would the Michael need a klipa and everything else be okay? if you say everything else is okay, then the Meichel should also be okay. No, the Meichel needs klipa. So I saw somebody bring this up, I forget who, and they say food is different. Food is more absorbent than metal. Makes sense, okay. So therefore the Ramah is a little bit more machmir on that the food has, because after all both are hot now, both are becoming hot, even though the Kedera was cold, the Kisui is cham, a cold shori. Machal tzarich klipo. Im efshel kolfo, only if you can actually remove a little bit of it. Bim lav, if you cannot remove it, when can't you remove a klipa from the machal? If it's a liquid. That would be one example, that you cannot easily remove a klipa from the machal. So that's a b'di'evet situation of klipa. Bim lav, a kol shori. Bim lo hoyo machal b'kedera, if there was no machal in the kedera, a kol shori. They have a kishtei kedera shenogu zubezu, because then if you don't have any food in the kedera, all you have is hot and cold, or even that both are hot, and there was never any food and any moisture whatsoever on the two of them, then it's two pots, two pieces of metal touching each other without liquid, without moisture, that they're both going to be mutter. So the main problem is when there is some moisture, or there's meichel, which produces moisture. So on that's where the shach, even though the shach seems to first agree and explain the Ramah, as to why the Ramah says if the top one is hot and the bottom one is cold, it's not such a big problem. He holds that if there is any lachluchis whatsoever, even on the top one, that you have to make hagola to both of them. That's what the shach seems to be. If you go through the whole shach, initially he explains the Ramah, because it's a machlekes, because he brings down here the Darkei Moshe, that there's a machlekes, the Yisuf Veheta says it would be asur, like Cham betoich tzoinen, the Geder would be asur, the Cham betoich tzoinen. The Agos Shari Dura says they would both be asur, because it's not like Irui, that only asks kedei klipa, where the heat stops. Here, it's continuing to be hot. It's continuing. So according to some opinions, this is worse than Irui because it's continuing to apply. The chamimas does not stop. Like by Irui, there is always a possibility that it only goes so far because it stops after a point. Here it would be more. It would be hotter. It would be more chomodik. But the Shach explains that according to the Ramah, it would be sufficient to clean, to be mekanech the kedera on top, where they both touched. You say the lachluchis became hot. This is according to the Ramah. He holds that he explains very nicely that even though there's moisture on the top, and the top is hot, the bottom is cold, that moisture that's coming down is like a kli sheni, which is very interesting. He holds that has a din of a kli sheni. In the end, he's machmir because he says, you know what? Even there are some places that by kli sheni there's a kli. Don't take it so lightly. So he initially says that the lachluch is the little moisture that is in the kisui is not a big deal, and it's lo domi le'irui. It's not like Iru even, that is a kedei klipa, because a little bit of a tipa, the chamimas completely stops. The heat completely stops. If all you have is a little bit of moisture, it's not a big deal. And it's not like a kli rishon. But anyway, in the maskana he writes that the big difference what would make a difference here is there lachluchis or not in the kisu. If there is any moisture on the kisu, even though the kisu is the one that's hot and the one at the bottom is cold, the moisture enough being hot would be sufficient to make both require hagala. So obviously, depending on the situation in your kitchen, what happens, using the wrong kisu could present a problem, unless one of them is not a ben yoima, and then you don't really have to be machmir, because even though the Ramah said before that din kisu k'dera is kedin k'dera atzma, right? Which basically what that means is that the tafshil is mutter, but the kisui, nevertheless, if it did absorb both, it's an enyo ben yoimar, it did absorb both tamim, you would have to make a gala to it anyway. When you want to use it right now, let's say this kisu for sure, or hasn't been used for a couple days. Oh, good. That's only concerning the tafshil that was made right now, that we may not have a concern. Givaldik, okay, good, save the day, I can eat it. But don't forget, the Gedera and the Kisui, especially if they're both hot, they've been allowed to become hot, and because of the Zayah coming up, they would both require Hagala. There's no doubt about that. Because even if something is Eno Ben Yoima, it has now the Blias of Basar B'chalav in it.
You do it on
Let's separately.
pot
separately.
Celtic side
Yeah.
and then on the fleshy side.
Yes, yeah, you would do separate Haggalah for both of them. Yeah, yeah. Anyways, I think this is where we can stop today. And in Mitzvah Hashem, next Thursday, not next Tuesday, there's no shiur, but next Thursday we'll do a little bit of review of a few additional dinim over here and going on to the next.
Good.